Alrighty, what is up, everyone? Welcome to the David Wells Experiment. I am your host, David Wells, and well, what a day it's been. I mean, it's not even well, it just turned 9:20 right now. Um, it's one of the things I like to do is stay up on current events, and I wouldn't even say this is current events what I'm going to talk about, but I saw some articles online that didn't make me too happy. One of them is about some relatively recent things and something else that happened a long time ago and speaks of a bigger problem. So anyway, I'm going to say let's start with the less serious thing, but at the same time it's just as serious. Um, okay, you know what? The less publicized thing we will say for later. Because when I read about it, I couldn't believe that it happened, and I was just gobsmacked. Yeah, maybe you never heard of it, but you'll know about it now. So anyway, I've talked about. Okay, yesterday's episode was all about the whole Dave Chappelle incident, him being attacked on stage. So somebody commented about it, Howard Stern, and Howard Stern has I'm going to talk about two things that he had an opinion on, and he's welcome to have his opinion. But, and just as he's welcome to have his opinion, I'm welcome to point out why I believe he's being inconsistent, or at the very least, point out the irony of his opinion. So, the first thing I'm going to point out that Howard Stern has talked about is he believes that Hollywood is super hypocritical for the difference between the Chris Rock slap at the Oscars and the guy who attacked Dave Chappelle. So he says that, Will Smith, he walked up there, slapped Chris Rock, walked back, sat down, and he got to accept his award and go home. And this other guy, who I'm not even going to try to make him famous, I found out who he was, but he's just not worth my effort to try to mention. This guy stormed Dave Chappelle's stage, attacked him, and then after Busta Rhymes and Jamie Foxx held him off, security came and beat the crap out of him. So Howard Stern's point, I believe, is that he thinks because Will Smith was a celebrity that he was treated a lot differently than Dave Chappelle Dave Chappelle's attacker was. And you know what? He's not wrong in that the situation was handled differently, but I do think that both situations were different. They had their own unique variables that have to be taken into consideration. So, one of the biggest things is we didn't know what was going on with the Oscars thing at first. Um, at first, a lot of people thought it was a bit at first, like that, oh, he made a joke about his wife and he slapped him, and people thought it was part of the act. We realized later on, no, it wasn't. Um, so yeah, and there was stuff going on behind the scenes to try to get him taken off stage or away from the Oscars. But Chris Rock decided not to press charges. He didn't think that it warranted that action. And yeah, so also you think Will Smith like, oh, he's walking up there. We know him as a squeaky clean guy. Um, Now, Will Smith did deserve to be taken to court for assault, but Chris Rock generously decided to show mercy. He didn't want to do it to him, and that's Chris Rock's decision. Now, it was assault, but it was not deadly assault. From what we can tell, like Will Smith did not mean deadly. He didn't have deadly intent. Still doesn't make what he did okay, but yeah, there's a I do think there's a difference between wanting to potentially kill someone and, you know, harassing someone. So I think you've got to take that into consideration. This dude clearly seemed intent to try to kill Dave Chappelle. Also, we didn't know anything about this guy. He was a total stranger, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And in my safety class for get my scooter license, they say eliminate variables, eliminate risk. So this guy who attacks Dave Chappelle, he demonstrates deadly intent. He has, as to the best of my knowledge, a fake gun which has a knife on it. And he attacks him. He's fended off. So why deadly force? Well, it's one of those things of like matching fire with fire. This guy demonstrated extreme prejudice. Therefore, they had to meet him with that in order to neutralize him as a threat. So I think one of the biggest differences is Will Smith didn't demonstrate lethal intent. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I just want to make this point clear. So I definitely think the Dave Chappelle attacker was worse. Now, as I mentioned, Will Smith is a celebrity, and people look to celebrities, whether they should or shouldn't, that's another matter. But he was punished. Chris Rock, again, he had the right to call the cops. He chose not to. So, and Will Smith has been given his punishment by the relevant parties there. And we're still picking up information on the Dave Chappelle attack. So, who knows? Maybe Howard Stern was just going off maybe that was just his immediate opinion. And who knows, maybe it could change. But anyway, that's my thought on that. Another thing that Howard Stern brought up is in the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard lawsuit of recent, where Johnny Depp is suing Amber Heard because him getting canceled by the op-ed she wrote. He's suing her because he lost a lot of money because a lot of movie studios dropped him from their projects. They didn't want to work with him. Now, my opinion of the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing is I kind of sided Team Johnny. Maybe stuff will come up in the legal proceedings and I'll have to change my opinion. But this happened so close in the wake of the Me Too movement where it feels like you didn't have to necessarily have evidence to back up an accusation. You can have an accusation, and that was enough. It seemed at the time. Like, maybe not legally, but you can make an accusation, and people who are working with you decided to drop you, such as the case with Johnny Depp and Warner Brothers and Disney. They had projects with him, and they didn't continue forward. Now, there are some instances where the accusations turned out to be true because they were looked into, and yeah, Harvey Weinstein, he's going to jail. Bill Cosby, he's guilty, basically, but somehow, through a legal technicality, he's not in jail. But the dude's career is over, and nobody's going to want to work with him, so hopefully he doesn't have the opportunity to hurt and influence people like the way he used to. And this happened, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing happened close enough to all that that she could just say that and, you know, he was canceled. Now, let's parallel this to the Bill Cosby thing. And I'm going to get to the Howard Stern stuff in a second. So, the Bill Cosby thing was he got accused, and people were kind of like, did he really? And even I was like, sort of, well, let's wait until we have some evidence. But then more and more women kept accusing him. And sooner or later, people were like, oh, shoot, I think he might be guilty. Now, parallel that to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Amber Heard makes an accusation, but unlike Bill Cosby, more and more people say, like, oh, Johnny was never that way. I didn't see these traits demonstrated. Now, you could make the case that, okay, let's say he did do that. Let's say he was this way. And just because other people say that it didn't happen doesn't mean that it did not happen. It could have happened. Okay, but if we're playing by these rules set up in the wake of the Me Too movement of the amount of sort of like the tug of war of like we have more accusers, like the more people you have, the more true it rings. I mean, if we're going by that logic, it seems that Johnny Depp is innocent. And if you just watch the proceedings and everything, it sort of leans me in that way too. But this is why I'm not a lawyer. So, anyway, Howard Stern's commentary was, it's funny. He said that he's like, Johnny Depp is sort of like milking this for, it's ridiculous. But anyway, he said that Johnny Depp is just like acting and putting on a performance. And who knows, maybe he is, but I don't think so. And he's like, and where's that accent from? Isn't this guy from Kentucky? Who sounds like that in Kentucky? What kind of accent is that? And it just basically accuses him of being very fake. Now, I find this really ironic because, how authentic is Howard Stern really? I mean, he's talking about Johnny Depp turning this whole court thing into a puppet show. And what is Howard Stern but a puppet show? I mean, what is the entirety of his career except, just a giant circus? So look at, and it's like, I don't know what, maybe there would have been a point if, like, the judge is like, is that your real accent? And he's like, oh no, it's something that I put together. But, just because somebody comes from a certain place doesn't mean they have to talk that way. I'm from Texas and I don't sound like I'm a hillbilly or nothing, but yeah, so, or who knows. Anyway, not one of Howard's best moments. But let's digress. So, it was very unfortunate that I saw an article today about fast food workers. Now, there are story of Karens galore, and I really hate using that word. I wish we had a different word. Um, I made a meme on TikTok saying let's call them Putins instead, because we're tired of Putin up with their attitudes. Anyway, but this goes beyond that. And we've seen some pretty horrible acts of, yeah, just villainy from them. But this is something else entirely. So apparently, in the early 90s and up until about the mid 2000s, there were these scam callers who would pretend to be police and they would call managers saying something like, such and such employee has, stolen something or they're carrying this drug. And this is going to be a little bit PG-13, so if you've got kids in the area, right now is your warning to stop this podcast and make them go away, or just, if you want to decide to listen to something else, that's cool. Here's the warning. So, five, four, three, two, one. So, these scam callers, they would, and I'm not going to call it a prank because this is worse than a prank. So, these scam callers would pretend to be police. They would sound legit. They knew all the legal lingo, and from what the manager would say, they thought they were talking to a cop. So one of the things they would say is they've got some stolen items on them. They've got they're hiding drugs, and they made these managers or authority figures in restaurants take their employees to a room and make them strip search for said items. Now, you might be appalled by this, and rightfully so. And I'm even more appalled that these people were stupid enough to go along with it. Now, I've read the article that was talking about this, and they, the managers say they thought that they were being told this by a police officer, and that a lot of them even hated doing it. And here's the thing, if a police officer tells me to do this, I'm not going to go along with it. If I'm at an airport and I have to get strip searched because for whatever reason they think I've got something deadly on me, okay, they've got a badge and a number I can look at. But apparently these dudes were just insanely well practiced guys talking on the phone. Now, not everybody in these instances fell for it. They were like, one dude even just heard him talk and then he hung up. But there were people who were tricked enough, and unfortunately, these kids, they were kids. Even if they were 20 or something, the ages fluctuate, and it's like I've heard about fast food workers being abused before, but this just takes it to a new level, and I can't believe we haven't heard of it. And this is a long time ago, and it may be due to inflation, but basically kids who were working for like $4 or $6 an hour were being humiliated, and their managers went along with it because they were afraid of getting in trouble. And you talk about a lot of fast food workers. It it bugs me because I currently work in fast food, and I can't imagine this happening. This sounds like something, if I turned off the safe search on Google, that it would be some sick video. But it's not. It's real life. It happened. And it just makes me think, when did it become cool? Or how has it become part of sort of the accepted norm that fast food workers are the people that we can kind of, crap on? Like, it's okay to abuse them. Now, hear people say something like, okay, like, oh, they're kids, they gotta know how stuff is in the real world. And it's like, this goes so beyond that. And some of you might say, well, that's not what we're talking about. When, okay, if that's the case, then good, we're on the same page on that. But I don't know how it's okay to learn to teach them it's okay to be horrible to people like that. And it's like, I don't get I don't know how there's this sort of like unwritten contract of like, okay, I bought a piece of chicken from you. Therefore, if you do something that displeases me, you get to be my punching bag. I don't know how that became a thing. I mean, I can only hypothesize. Maybe, when fast food became a thing, it was sort of America in an economic boom. And so people were moving away from like sort of the agrarian state, which is really hard, backbreaking labor, to something much lighter. And so, of course, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I've had it worse. So who knows? Now, I should say for the most part, people in fast food, like our customers are great, but we do have those people who I just feel like it's frustrating to hear about something that happened a long time ago and that people were being paid much, much less. Now, some of these people had the good sense to just quit and not work there. And I have really mixed feelings about, fast food workers quitting en masse. Like, they don't want to put up with crap. And it's like, honestly, in a way, I kind of support them. It's like, I'm from a different time where I can endure more, and maybe I shouldn't endure so much. But it's like, and fast food places, they wonder why are people, ditching us? Well, it's really simple. They don't want things like this to happen. Now, I should say, I'm those terrible experiences I'm talking about. They peaked in the mid 2000s, 2003, I think. They caught the dude who was making these calls pretending to be a police officer, and with the exception of a couple incidents, it didn't happen again. Now, I would not be surprised if this happened somewhere else with other guys, but it feels like there's something really wrong with fast food workers, and like there's this thing of where we're trained to always obey the customers. There's something really flawed with the whole the customer's always right thing. It's like in subjective matters, yes, they will always win out, but when it comes to objectivity, they can be wrong. Anyway, I'm just baffled that these people didn't have the common sense to just refuse these calls because these kids had to be humiliated because somebody was so worried about losing their job. If a cop says to do something like that, you don't listen. You disobey them. Even if this dude was an actual cop, I would not listen to him. I'd be like, you know what, take me to jail, but I'm not doing this to that person. I don't think a cop is even supposed to act that way. It's. I know this happened almost 20 years ago, and one of the people, I'm not going to mention her name, but the article stressed that she had volunteered to be named to speak on the matter and make people aware. It's just such a shame that this dude had to get his jollies by putting these kids through that. And I'll say this, I'm glad that kids these days are not putting up with the same thing that other people just didn't know how to say no to. Because that's what's going to change, I think, and make fast food better when we don't tolerate terrible people. I mean, there's so let me be clear. I do know there are some kids who deserve, sometimes people need a stern word to like be made better. I've done that myself, but nobody get deserves to be treated like less than human. And a lot of people center around the whole $15 an hour thing and even higher than that. But here's the thing. I'm so willing to work for less if you just deal with terrible people better. Like, don't be so desperate of losing their $5 sandwiches that. Because do we really want those kinds of people to show up? I mean, honestly, it's like, I feel like I've gotten to a state where I'm like, I sort of don't know how to segue into anything else. But anyway, that was an article I just couldn't believe happened, and thank goodness it's not happened to anyone that I know of. I had a manager once who, one time, I had a manager, won't mention the individual, but a customer like threw soda at this person and then drove off. We called the cops. They looked at security footage. It's just like, I think we need this collective reprogramming that fast food is the people that you can use as a punching bag. I'm sounding repetitive, but I would really hope that y'all agree with me on this. And I wanted to try to segue into some other subject matters, but currently as it is, I've sort of worked myself up and I can't think of a way to segue into another subject matter. So, alright, this has been the David Wells experiment. Hopefully if you go to a fast food place, just remember they're probably trying to do their best. They're short on people, so maybe they didn't get the best training. And they're just trying to get through it like you are. And they just really don't want to be there. So show them some slack, even if everything isn't going great. Have an absolutely super day, and we'll see you next time.